Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We'll give a few minutes here to allow the remainder of the participants to join, and we'll just get kicked off in a minute or two here. All right, well, we'll start getting it kicked off and introduce some of our speakers here. First of all, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Robbie Reynolds, and I'm here with Bill, and here to help lead you through the webinar today, along with our host, who I'll introduce here in a second. Wanted to also mention that this webinar is brought to you by Build and Construct Connect today. And we're going to talk about how to grow your subcontracting business sustainably. I know everyone's got really busy schedules, so I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day and excited for the content that we're going to cover. And just a few housekeeping notes before we introduce Greg and Stephen here, is that throughout the presentation, we will keep lines on mute, but please, you can ask questions over the chat, which is at the bottom, the right-hand side of your screen. And we will collect questions throughout the webinar, and there will be some time for Q&A at the end. Additionally, there will be a poll at the very end where we ask you a few questions, so please stick around for that as well. So to kick us off, today we have Greg Duica, and Greg is a product training specialist and a senior demonstration engineer at Construct Connect. He's got more than 24 years with the company and helped thousands of estimators sharpen their skills and win more bids. Before that, Greg spent 20 years in commercial construction and working on projects ranging from multifamily to historical restoration and site infrastructure. Most notably was his work on the Texas State Capitol building. Greg is a graduate of Texas State University and enjoys playing tennis and spending time with his family. So Greg, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, Greg, I think we got you on mute here.
Yes, you do. Sorry about that. Thank you, Robbie. I really appreciate it. I'm glad to be here, and thanks to everyone attending today.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. As well, we have Stephen Peterson. Now, Stephen Peterson has over 37 years of experience in the construction industry. Starting in 1985, he spent time as an estimator, superintendent, project manager, and engineer at various commercial and civil projects. His signature project included an $80 million recreational development that included a 323-room hotel condominium. Stephen recently retired from Weber State University, where he was a construction and building science professor for 22 years. He specializes in the financial side of running a successful construction company. He's the author of several books, including Construction Accounting and Financial Management, Construction Estimating Using Excel, and Pearson's Pocket Guide to Construction Management. He also co-authored Estimating and Building Construction, and in total, his books have sold over 68,000 copies. Stephen's an MBA and MS in Civil Engineering from the University of Utah, and is a licensed professional engineer and a member of the Design Build Institute of America. Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I appreciate all of you taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today.
Same here, absolutely. Okay, well, I'm going to hand it over to Greg now, who's going to introduce more of the topics of this webinar and walk us through the first portion. Greg?
Thank you, Robbie. Very much. I appreciate it, guys. And again, thanks to all of you for attending. Robbie said it. I know you're all very busy, so we're going to really give you some good information today, and that you can carry with you from here. Once again, I've got 20 years in the construction industry, both from hands-on all the way as a subcontractor through general contracting, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my personal experiences with you guys on what we're going to show you today in terms of how to grow your company, and mix that in with the fact of you need some help with the financing end of it on the other side. So there are a lot of different ways to grow your company. Here's 4 primary targets. Legacy. You want your company to have a long legacy. Money. The more you grow, the more money that moves through your system and the more money you make. Employee opportunity. As a company owner, you know you have obligations to your employees, and this is going to be helpful for you to understand that process in the bigger picture of growing your company. And the final part is safety net. You need a safety net. This industry is so volatile, more now than ever before. A safety net in terms of didn't see that coming, or change orders and addenda, things like that that can change your entire bid as well as contract amount. So safety net is also very, very critical. Growth can make traditional subcontracting challenges even more challenging. I mean, think about it. You need to grow your company. You want to grow your company. So we're talking about winning more jobs. That helps, obviously. Then from there, we roll into bankrolling the materials and equipment. So if you win more jobs, you're going to have the knowledge and the tools available to handle the additional material and equipment costs. And then that leads to the next thing, and that's project management. You've got to manage more work. Can you do it? Do you have the staff to do it? We're going to give you some help today on all of that. Now, there are a lot of pitfalls. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, as many of you already know, all the things that can go wrong. One major deal that can hurt you is overextending your cash. Don't rent that equipment out there for 6 months if you only needed it for 3. Don't overextend that cash. Don't go out and invest in tools or trucks or things like that unless you know for sure you've got it covered in your overhead fees in the jobs you're winning. Don't overextend yourself. And the other one is taking on jobs that don't fit the skill. I have witnessed this in so many instances where a contractor will say, you know what, I'm doing concrete, but I bet I could do some paint. Well, maybe not. Don't take on a job that don't fit your skills. Growing sustainably and profitably. Now, getting the jobs done efficiently, that is so critical. Goes back to the legacy part, and profitably with a strong cash flow. They go hand in hand. So we're going to talk about how to get the jobs done efficiently and keep that profit. Healthy pipeline. A pipeline is a common word around the world today, and you need a good pipeline. The projects that fit the strengths of your business. In other words, they are projects you know that you've done, you can make a profit, you can get them finished. Now, here's the 6 primary topics we're going to cover today. 6 steps to build that pipeline of projects to fit your business. Identify your niche. What is your best at? What do you do? Are you a painter, flooring, roofing? What is the type of work that you do the best? Identify that. You need to know what it is. Don't guess at what you're going to bid. Identify the target jobs. Again, same thing. Don't just say, you know what, I'm going to throw a dart at a dartboard and I'll take whatever I get. Don't do that. Target the projects you want and that you do right. Identify them. And identify the target GCs. Who do you want to do work for? Who's out there that's reliable, that has been around a while, they pay on time, they are trustworthy, they are established. Identify who those people are. Using tools to systemize your strategy. I'm talking about keeping good records, keeping a good history. You need to build your strategy based on past history going forward. And there are a lot of different types of tools to systemize that, both in a hardware standpoint, computer hardware, good filing system, staffs, things like that, to systemize that strategy so you know going forward what you're going to do. Number 5, know your competition. We're going to talk about that. Who are you bidding against? You got to know that. And the last one, deliver what you sold. Okay. Be true to your word. I'm going to build you a good job on time and on budget and high quality. Deliver what you promise. Step 1, what is your niche? So look at the historical performance to identify your niche. Where are you most productive, most profitable, and the least amount of risk? The big R, risk. I don't have to define that. Everybody understands it. Risk is huge in the construction industry. So you want to be sure that you are looking at what jobs does my team have the most experience doing. You got to think about it. It's not just you and your secretary. It's you, the secretary, the project manager, the estimator, the carpenters out on the site. It is a team. What do they do the best? What jobs have I beaten the projections on and gained more profit than anticipated? I said the word history a while ago. Keep good records. Those become historical records that you can go back and say, you know what? We knock it out of the park on schools. We knock it out of the park on multifamily or something. What have I done in the past that worked? As far as finishing a job early, that is a luxury beyond your wildest imaginations. To get off a job early means your payroll off that job comes to a halt. Your overhead is over. Get off the job early, you're making more money. And the last one, what jobs have I completed with the least amount of headaches? That goes back to the big R stress word of risk. Headaches, least headaches. That makes a full circle because headaches can be tied to the GC you're bidding with. So know who they are, know who's out there, and keep a history of the jobs that went well. Identify target jobs that fit your niche. Now, categorize it, okay? Categorize your niche to identify where we're going in the future. What are we going to be looking for out there? Contract amount. That's a huge issue. It's so tempting to say, you know what? I'm going after $1 million deal. Well, yeah, $1 million sounds real good. It looks good, but can I handle a contract amount of that big? Duration. Okay, 6 months job. All right, I got it. But think about this, a year-long job. You're going through 4 seasons, rain, snow, sleet, sun, heat. Can you handle a duration of a longer time period? Remember, you're tying up your crews and your equipment based on duration. You got to think about it. Categorize it by public or private. Is it public work? Okay. And that comes with its own set of rules. You're going to be in a high bid pool or private. I used to call those invitation bids. They're private, but you got to play by their rules. They have their own set. You're going to bid private bid. You're going to play a different game in terms of profit margin. Yes, you have a lower bid risk in terms of number of people, but you also have to meet a lot of rules that the owner is going to call out on you. So there are pros and cons to public and private work. Know what those are. Open bid and closed bid. This is an important thing to think about. I used to look at when I was bidding projects, am I in the middle of the pool? Am I at the bottom of the pool? Am I at the top? Or am I so high, nobody will even look at me? An open bid environment allows you to know who your competition is and what your number is compared to the group. Okay, how are you doing on the market? Are you competitive? Are you doing something wrong? Versus a closed bid, you don't know who else was bidding the job and you don't even know where you were in the group. Are you high, medium, or low? Think about open bid versus closed bid environment. Specialties. Now, you could get yourself into major trouble here. I experienced this personally. I was doing a lot of interior work, metal framing, drywall, acoustic ceilings, and along came an opportunity to do clean room. Okay, clean room. And I was like, oh, this is good. It's specialty. I can do it. It's the same thing, only under a certain environment. I lost it. I lost money because I did not know how to specialize that equipment, crews, techniques, applications. If you're going to do a specialty, be very careful. And a lot of people fall into that trap because they go, okay, I'm going to be a fire stopping contractor. Are you licensed or certified? You can get into big trouble by bidding in specialty situations when you're not really qualified. And the last one is equipment. You need to categorize projects that handle the equipment that you know how to use. You have certified operators that you can afford and that's in the budget. Don't order a 20-ton crane on a job you budgeted a 10-ton. Don't rent equipment for 6 months when you only needed them for 3. If you have equipment, you got to maintain it. You got to keep it fueled. You have to repair it. Be sure that you categorize the jobs that fit the equipment that you have and or can use. Identify target GCs. This one is really near and dear to my heart. I've been here on both sides. I worked as a sub and I've worked as a GC. Now, create a list of GCs who have the jobs you want. Don't go chasing after something that is a job you don't really want, but it's that dangling carrot. You want a list of the GCs who bid the work that you can do. Then build a relationship. That means take them to lunch, okay? Be consistent with them. Bid their projects. When they invite you to bid, don't say I'm too busy. That's an insult. They invited you. You need to be there. Get face to face with them. That's what I'm talking about. A fishing trip, a lunch, a cup of coffee. They need you and you need them. The more you get to know each other and build that relationship, the better it's going to be. They'll be calling you on every bid they look at. They're going to be dependent upon you. So you need to find the opportunities to add value. They are going to say, hey, that Greg guy, he's always on time and he bids well. His bids are complete. I want to talk to him on every job. Find those opportunities to get to know them. Now, here are some tools to systemize it. Technology. I live in the technology world. I've been with this company, Construct Connect, for 24 years. And I have a front row seat to all of the technology that's out there available that is, top of the line. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more at the end of the webinar today. But there's so much out there to receive notifications automatically, electronically on your phone about jobs that fit your target and that are coming from the GCs that you want to bid. New project data. We're talking about addenda. Is there addenda on this project? When is the pre-bid meeting? Is it mandatory? And simplify your bid management method. In other words, don't get a bunch of stuff in front of you that does not apply, that does not fit your strategy. You want to be sure that the notifications you receive fit your strategy and what I call a profile, your company profile. Here it comes. This could be applied to so many other things in the world. Know your competition, okay, whether it's sports or not, but in your business, same rules apply. You need to know who your competition is because there is a lot of things going on in here. Tailor your bidding strategy based on who is your competition. You can win more jobs and get more profit by paying attention to who's out there. I know most of you in the group today understand the term tailgater, okay? And I hate to be rude, but I have to say it. I got beat a lot of times on projects where I've got overhead, I have crews, I have an office, I have insurance, I have a lot of things like that. Along comes a guy who's working out of the back of his truck. How did he get into this bid list? What's he doing here? But if I know he's in the group, I have to rethink my bidding strategy in terms of how bad do I want this project and what do I need to do to be competitive based on who my competition is. So it's very important. This is a big, big step here in terms of you base your strategy on who else is in the pool with you. Now, goes back to the last one, deliver what you sold. Remember the part about legacy? Your company legacy rides on the fact that, can you do that? Can you deliver what you sold? Don't leave a job unfinished. Don't finish a job late. Hold your budget, because deliver what you sold goes to the GC. It goes to the owner. Architects pay attention to what you're doing. And remember, this also spills right back into the part of the employees that you hired and keep. They deserve a good, solid company. They deserve job security. They deserve to be able to go home with a paycheck. They deserve to have some longevity in terms of what they're going to be doing. Deliver what you sold. All of those things start to happen. And it comes to what's known as becoming a preferred bidder. As a sub, I worked hard to get on that list, and it paid me back in so many ways. Preferred bidder. The GCs keep a list of their preferred bidders. I promise you, I kept a list as a general contractor. I kept it on the top of my desk. Whenever a bid would come along, I'd grab that preferred bidder list. So all of these things that I've mentioned come back around to repeat business by knowing your niche, staying on that strategy, deliver your promises. You will be a preferred bidder. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is the financing side of it. Stephen's going to take you guys down a path on some information about managing the money side of it. And so I'm going to turn it over to Stephen at this stage. And here you go, Stephen.
Well, thank you, Greg. When I first started out in the construction industry, I had a mentor, Bill Theed was his name, and he owned a construction company. And he taught me these basic 6 principles of doing business in the construction industry. He had identified that his company was really good at doing and dealing with government agencies and doing their type of work and dealing with the paperwork and the Davis-Bacon wages and all that came along with that. And so he targeted projects that were with government agencies. He identified which of his customers he preferred to work with. There were customers on our customer list that we charged a premium for because we knew they were going to be extra difficult to work with. And then he also, whenever we got it, and this was back in the early days, this was before computers were around, we'd get a magazine every week that would list all of the publicly bid jobs and who was bidding on those. And we would sit down and look at those, and we would look at who was bidding on it, how many people were bidding on it. We had a binder, and every page in that binder represented a contractor that we had bid against. And every job we bid against those people on, there was listed there, and there was a markup. How much could we have marked up our cost and still won the job? And so we could sit there and we could say, oh, these are people that we can get higher market, we could beat easily. These are tougher ones. And we would sit down and select those jobs to spend our time on based upon who our competition was. While I was there, the PC was invented, which really kind of dates me. And we began to use PCs and spreadsheets. This was long before Microsoft was even around, and we started to use those in our bid. And we also had to, deliver what we sold to be able to maintain our ability to be pre-qualified to bid on those. In this next segment, we're going to look at cash and cash flows and how critical that is to the operation of a construction company. And as we go through this section, here's 6 questions to kind of keep in the back of your mind. And we're not necessarily going to see all these questions on the slide. Some of them we will, but they're questions that we're going to be discussing and thinking about. So here are the questions. What cash flow mistakes do contractors make? Why do strong businesses run into cash flow challenges? What are the effects of an insufficient cash flow? How can I identify future cash flow challenges? How can I improve my cash flow? And how does improved cash flow help my business? Let's start by demystifying or debunking some myths. And here are 3 myths. First is, if I'm profitable, my cash flow is strong. Cash flow and profit go hand in hand. They oftentimes are tied to each other, but they're not the same thing. Let me give you kind of a really abstract example. Let's say, suppose a contractor came to you and asked you to bid on a project. The project was going to take a year to complete and cost $1 million to do it. And the catch is the owner wasn't going to pay for that project until a couple of years after you've completed the project. And so you're going to have to fund that project not only during construction, but for several years after that project. Now, suppose you were offered $2 million to complete that project. So you've got $1 million profit on $1 million job, highly profitable job. But unless you have the cash flow and the cash to be able to fund that for the year of construction and the 2 years until you get paid, you can't take on the job. And so cash flow is more about the timing of when cash flows and not necessarily the profitability. The job is very profitable, but the cash flow was something that I would have to fund for several years. The second myth is winning more projects helps my cash flow. And that's actually absolutely false. The more projects you have, the more cash flow that you need. And the next thing is the limit to my growth is how much my work crews can handle. And so crews, yes, definitely they're going to control how much we can do on a project, but they're not necessarily the only thing. Crews are a function of how much cash I have. If I can't pay for my crews, I'm not going to have a crew on the job. I'm not going to be able to do it. If I can't pay for materials, then I'm not going to have materials for my crews to install. So crews are only part of the equation, and they are also a function of cash. I want to give you an example of a project I did when I was working for this first contractor that had a cash flow. We're going to go back to that abstract example. We were did as a general contractor on a project. And the catch on this project is it's what we would nowadays call a public-private partnership. The government wasn't going to pay for it as we went along through the project. They were going to pay for that over several years. And the contract was on that, went up to 15 years. And so if we could not have gotten the cash put together to run that job, and that was funded through some equity and some banking financing, then we would never have been able to do that job. And that job was critical to us. Before we bid on that job, we could bid to $500,000. And if we begged and the bonding company was in a good mood, we might get to 700,000. This turned out to be the first job that we did that was over $1 million. And from that job and the success on that job and the cash flows coming in from that job, we were within a short period of time bidding on projects in the $2 to $3 million range. And so in 18 months, simply because we were able to come up with the necessary cash, we went from bidding from $500,000, maybe $700,000 to bidding in the $2 and $3 million range. And so cash flow is a critical part of growing your company. There are a number of things that are inherent in our industry that can cause even good managed companies, even the best of companies, to run into financial difficulties. We first need to understand our industry is a slow paying industry. We have a long payment chain. And as subcontractors, we're at the bottom of that payment chain, which means we send an invoice. It takes several steps to get back to the owner, and then the owner pays that invoice and it comes back to us. We often see that we could spend money, we could bill for that, and we could be out 2 or 3 months before we paid. The second thing is limited third-party financing. If we go to a bank and ask for financing, a lot of times we're talking to bankers that have never dealt with the construction industry. I am currently doing some work, writing some materials for another author's book on accounting that's written for the general public, for business schools. And in that book, construction companies are used as an example only once. Nothing about the unique characteristics of construction accounting is discussed. And so you're going to run into bankers that don't understand how retention affects a business and how the fact that we're dealing with long-term contracts and progress payments are going to affect your business. And so a lot of times they'll look at your business and say, you've got all this retention out. It's been out for 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. Why aren't you collecting it? And they're clueless as to some of the financial challenges we face. The other thing is with third-party financing is a lot of times we shoot ourselves in the foot in that we don't plan ahead and look ahead for potential cash flow problems. And we wait until we need the money to run into the bank or a financing professional and ask for the money. And it's, oh, I need to make payroll next week and I need money to do that. And so when we're doing that, it's very hard to get the money. They're going to say, you know, if you haven't managed your cash flow, I'm not sure we want to loan money to you. The next thing is limited supplier financing. We need to understand our material suppliers are not in the business of financing construction. They're in the business of selling materials, and they make money by turning over their inventory. Suppose you had $10,000 of loan in the material supplier's yard, and they turn that over once a year, meaning they sell it and they get the money back and then they buy more materials. And they make 1% on it. They're only going to make 1%. If they can turn that every month, they're going to make 12%. If they can turn that every week, they're going to make 52%. And so they make their money by turning over the materials, getting paid so that they can buy more materials. And they're not really in the business of financing those materials. The fourth thing is supply chain delays. We're seeing these have been an incredible problem over the last few years. They've been a problem every once in a while. There is a material, we run in concrete one year, steel another year, where we simply cannot get the materials. These delays cause delays in construction projects. They string out payments on there. If we've got retention on a project and that project gets strung out because of material delays, we can't get roofing materials, or lumber is hard to get, or concrete, whatever it is, that retention hangs out. And the longer it sits on the books, the longer that cash flow is tied up and unavailable for us to use in our business. And finally, unpaid work. As subcontractors, we're at the bottom of the chain, which means there's several people above us. Any one of those who run into financial problems, whether it's delay in being able to pay their bills, going through bankruptcy, or simply going out of business and leaving us holding the bag, it either delays our payments, or it could possibly even mean that we don't get paid for work that we've done. What are the effects of an insufficient cash flow? We'll start with the job. Late labor payments means it's going to be hard to get. You're not going to get people to work for you if you're not paying them on time. A lot of people nowadays are living paycheck to paycheck. One of the trends that I'm seeing in the local industry, the local grocery store, to get people to go to work for them, is advertising. We'll pay on a daily basis. So payment of labor. If we can't get labor, we can't get the job done. It's going to kill our productivity. If we can't get materials, if we don't have the money to buy materials, or we're slow paying on materials, it's going to be hard to get materials. We don't have materials for our labor install, then we're going to kill our productivity on the job. The other is that we need to keep our equipment in new and good running order, replace it as it gets older. When we have old equipment, the equipment tends to break down more often. Every time a piece of equipment breaks down, we've got to wait for it to be fixed, or we've got to be able to rent a piece of equipment, which increases our cost and it gets delays while we're getting there. Or, for example, if we're using a forklift to stock lumber on the second or third floor of a building, and our equipment breaks down, we might have to be carrying that lumber up there. All of these things kill productivity and make it hard to complete jobs. If we're having those kinds of challenges on our jobs, we're going to start having some business challenges. And one of those is that we're going to start to not be favored by general contractors. Our customers are not going to be happy with us if we're slow because we're having problems getting labor materials or keeping our equipment functioning. If we don't have cash, we may simply have to pass on the job. Thinking back to that original project, that first $1 million project I did in my life, and now $1 million doesn't seem like that much money, but that was one of my favorite projects. It was a milestone for me. We could have never done that project had we not been able to come up with the cash. And frankly, we really had to scramble to come up with that cash to do that project. And then the other thing is that once we have one job going bad, where we're having troubles getting labor materials, we're getting delays, it tends to parlay and roll over into all of our jobs. If we can't get our crew off of the first job and onto the second job, it creates delays there, which feeds back into we burn more bridges with our general contractors. All of this cash that we need to run a business costs money. And the longer that money is tied up, the greater our interest costs are. So it's very easy for interest costs to grow exponentially. And this is even more important. A year ago, you could borrow money for next to nothing, and it was very easy. Their interest costs were not. We've seen that interest costs are rapidly increasing. That will continue for some time. So interest costs are going to become a bigger part of our business. We're not paying things on time. Our material suppliers are going to be complaining to our credit agencies, and it's going to hurt our credit scores. And that credit score damage then makes it hard to get alternate financing or finding capital that we need to finance that cash. So this kind of is kind of a spiral that it's very easy if it starts to happen to a company, it's very easy for it to spin out of control. So let's talk about some of the things that we can do to identify our cash flow challenges, look at what we're doing. The first thing is you got to have a cash flow plan. Cash flow is an important asset. If I were to ask you or ask people in the industry, why should a general contractor hire a subcontractor? Or if I would go to many of the construction textbooks, here are the answers I'd find. Well, you transfer the risk to the subcontractor. The subcontractor is specialized and they can do the work cheaper and faster and things along that line. The truth is as a general contractor, I can hire all of those things. I can hire people who run the job. I can hire people who are experienced in that. I can manage that risk. Oftentimes, what I'm hiring for is I'm hiring because you have cash and I want you to be financing that job. And so what you bring to the table, oftentimes the most important thing is your access to cash. And so we need to understand that cash is a critical asset for your company. You got to manage that asset just as you manage people, just as you manage other resources. Need a short and long-term plan. By short-term plan, I mean something that will take us through the next 30, 60, 90 days, kind of your next billing cycle. If you submitted bills, you have an idea of when you're going to get paid. And if you've got bills coming in and payroll coming in, you have an idea when that cash is going out. You should be taking a look at that weekly and saying, do I have enough cash to get through the next 3 or 4 months? We also need a long-term cash flow plan, 1 year or so, where we can look at going out and finding out what financing we need. Now, as part of that cash flow plan, there's some things that we can look at. And a lot of times in accounting, we look at ratios. There are several dozen different ratios that we can look at. I'm going to talk about 4 of the most critical ones when we're dealing with cash flow. Now, one of the questions that I always get asked is, what should these ratios be? And the answer is it really depends. It depends on your industry. And by subcontractors, labor ratios. And so it's not possible to simply in this seminar give you one size fits all, a one size fits all ratio. The ratios are kind of like Goldilocks. They can be too high, too low. We want things just right. And so there's kind of a sweet spot in the middle. So the first one is working capital. Working capital is defined as your current assets minus your current liabilities. The current assets are your cash, your accounts receivable, and your inventory, and anything else that we can turn into cash when it's in the next year. Current liabilities are things like payroll, your accounts payable, what you're going to have to pay on loans in the next year. And those are anything that we're going to have to pay that are currently on their books in the next year. Working capital, the difference between those two, hopefully it's positive. If it's not, we're in trouble as a business. That positive cash flow is what we have available to finance construction projects. The next thing is the average collection period versus the average age of accounts payable. The average collection period is really a dollar-weighted average of how long it takes to collect your receivable from your from the person, your general contractor or the subcontractor above you. And it's just how long does it take for us to get paid? Average age of accounts payable is how long do we take to pay our suppliers? Again, it's a weighted average. Ideally, the average age of accounts payable is greater than our average collection period, which means we're collecting money before we pay it out. The reality for our industry is that is not the case. In most cases, we are paying things out before we are getting paid. One thing to note in here is that when we talk about collection period versus accounts payable, we're ignoring payroll, and payroll is always paid out before we get that collected from the owner, because we have to pay that every week or even more often than that. Now, another ratio that we might look at is the asset test ratio. And this is really how much cash and accounts receivable do we have, and how does that compare to our current liabilities? And so current liabilities, again, is everything that we're going to pay out that is currently on our books within the next year. And this just says, if we have cash and convert all of our accounts receivable to cash, then can we pay our current liabilities? And typically, when I use accounts receivable, we do not include retention in that, anything that's retention. And really what this says is that if our cash and accounts receivable are less than our current liabilities, I'm going to have to convert inventory or some other asset to cash or raise some cash somehow to pay my liabilities. The final one is debt to equity. Debt is everything I owe based upon financing, and that would be your accounts payable, any lines of credit you have, anything you owe material suppliers, anything along those lines. Equity is how much I own in the company. If I were to liquidate the company and pay all my bills, what would be left over? And this is one of the key ratios that bankers and other financing professionals look at when they look at extending your credit. If you have a real low ratio, say 1-to-1, you have the potential to raise capital through loans and other methods. If you've got a really high ratio, maybe it's 5-to-1 or so, then you're a higher credit risk, because it means that a very small bump in your profitability can send you into a bankruptcy. And so you're less likely to do that. So that's going to determine whether or not you can get third-party financing, or if you need to seek, if you have a really high debt to equity ratio, you're going to probably have to look at equity financing to do that. Now, one thing that is important on developing your plan is that you've got to hire, if you don't know how to do these ratios, you don't know how to analyze a cash flow, you need to get somebody experienced, get an accountant in there that is experienced in that, and be sure to get somebody who has experience with the construction industry. These ratios, if you go to a standard accounting book, they will talk about these ratios. There's a lot of modifications we need to take into account for dealing with retention and the fact that we're getting paid over time. Now, the next topic is really, how do we improve our cash flow? And there's two ways to improve cash flows. One is collect it faster, accelerate the cash coming in. And two is slow down how much cash flow is flowing out. Think of this as filling a bucket that has a hole in the bottom. There's two ways to get that bucket full faster: is open up the valve and push more water in there, or plug up the hole or slow down the cash coming out. And so let's look at the first one, accelerating your cash flows. Obviously, we're going to collect faster, collect our receivables faster. Anytime we can convert a non-cash asset, assets are things that we own of value, into cash, that's going to accelerate our cash flow. And so we want to sell any unused asset. That may be unused equipment. That also may be inventory. If we've got a lot of inventory on hand, we may need to sell that inventory to finance our projects. And so we may have to rely upon suppliers and order just what we need rather than order in bulk to improve our cash flow, and then increase your profit. And increasing your profit, the best way to do that is cut your cost. And cutting your cost has two upsides to it. First off, let's say I cut my labor cost on a project by $10,000 in labor. First off, I don't have to finance that $10,000 in labor or $10,000 in material while I'm waiting to get paid. So there's the first benefit. The second thing is when I do get paid for that, that's profit. And that turns out that that's cash that I can use to fund my next project. So that's kind of increasing your profit is a double dipping, because you get the benefit immediately of reducing your cash needs on the project and generating more cash for projects in the future. Slowing cash down out is simply you've got to either negotiate better payment terms. I'm not talking here about not paying your suppliers, because that's going to ruin the credit rating, but getting better payment terms, longer payment terms, so that you have more time to pay those. What we're really talking about here is cutting down that time period between the average age of your accounts receivable and your average age of your accounts payable. And then the other thing is to go out and leverage your business by getting third-party financing, whether that's a line of credit, loans on your equipment, or third-party material financing. So quickly, the benefits of this is we're going to have stronger relationships with our labor, or with our material suppliers, with our general contractors, with our any subcontractors that we might have. We're going to be able to get our materials on time. We're going to get better material pricing, and we're going to have the cash to grow. In short, when we have a good cash flow, we're going to have less stress. We're going to be able to sleep well at night. Our business is not something that's going to cause us continuous worry. Final takeaways is first, find your niche. There we go. Find your niche. Second is to make a strategic plan to capitalize on that niche. And then don't assume that strong projects equal strong cash flow. Again, profitability and cash flow are two different things. They both must be managed to be successful. Identify your cash flow problems and create a financial plan. And again, if you don't know how to do this, this is where you need to spend a little bit of money, bring somebody in who knows how to do that and help you sort through that. The ratios are complex, and when you change some things, it can change multiple ratios. And you need somebody who knows how to deal with that to kind of look at how to improve that cash flow. And then improve your cash flow to increase your growth potential. Cash, again, going back to that project, if we were not able to get that cash, we could have never done that $1 million project. That $1 million project, the success of that allowed us to bond $2+ million projects. We would have still been bidding projects under $1 million had we not had the cash to do that. I appreciate you joining us today. Take a minute at the end of the seminar, connect with me, send me a connection request on LinkedIn if you'd like. And with that, we're going to go back, I believe, to Robbie for the next segment.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. So just wanted to introduce a little bit about Build and kind of what we're all about. Build is really built to help contractors like yourselves improve their cash flow and grow their business. And when we looked at the industry, we didn't think that there was anyone who really recognized how difficult it is to manage a construction business and understood the cash flow challenges that are presented with that. So that's what we set out to do. We're 100% dedicated to construction and have built working capital and financing products to help solve unique needs of the industry. Primarily, we do two things. One, we have a material financing program where we will help you pay your suppliers up front and then extend 120-day terms to pay for those materials. As Stephen talked to earlier, it's really to help line up your payment for those materials when you actually get paid, then also providing increased credit terms so you can take on more projects and bigger projects. Additionally, we have a product called our Pay App Advance. And when you have approved invoices from your GC, Build will advance funds on that invoice immediately. You retain control of your collection process with your GC, and when you get paid, you pay back Build. This is also really to help speed up that cash conversion process so you can keep more cash in your bank account and grow your business. At the end here, we'll have a little survey if you'd like someone from Build to reach out to you. What we typically go through is we have one of our financial consultants will get on the phone and walk through your business, kind of help assess your current working capital position, and then put together a game plan to how you can improve your cash flow and also hit your growth goals, and where Build or potentially other partners can help you get there. So with that, I'll hand it over to Greg to tell us a little bit about Construct Connect.
Thank you, Robbie. I appreciate it. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the segment here about strategy and technology. And like I mentioned, I've been with Construct Connect now for 24, going on 25 years, and I've had the opportunity and the good luck to be able to work with good technology and to understand the needs of contractors. So what we have at Construct Connect are a lot of tools available that work right in line with what you need to grow your company. Find projects from a network of 100,000 plus GCs, architects, and owners. We have a product called Insight that'll help you go out there and see who's bidding what and where. From there, you can say, okay, here's some jobs that look good. I'm going to go into another product we have called Project Intelligence. It is one giant search engine. You simply put in your company profile and you say, okay, again, I want only projects under a certain value, $100,000 in Central Texas, open wage, concrete, or painting, and it finds them and brings them straight back to you. It's a click of a mouse. You've got the information right in front of you. Comprehensive, up to date, list of leads. Then you say, you know what, this one looks good. You hit download. Here come the plans and specs. You haven't left your office. I can remember having to drive all over the state of Texas trying to get my hands on blueprints, specs, and deposits that had to go with all of that. This is different. You're sitting at your desk and they're right at your fingertips. Then you have what is known as Bid Center. Think of it like an electronic bid board. It's going to allow you to track the status. Okay, am I bidding it? If so, here's the people I want to bid to. What's the status? Do I have the latest addenda? Do I have the latest specs? A Bid Center tool. And then the takeoff. We have several digital takeoff tools in terms of measurement of what is it you're looking at. You're going to have these plans in front of you, set your scale, start measuring, and you're going to end up with accuracy much better than what you were doing by hand. And they're going to be managed in terms of in color. They can be printed, everything you would need from a takeoff all the way through project management in a digital world. And so we're available for more information. Again, Robbie will be doing a survey. I'll be glad to connect with you and make sure you get more information about our products. Thank you. Back to you, Robbie.
Oh, thank you, Greg. We're going to open it up here for some Q&A. I've had a couple of questions that have come in throughout the course of the presentation here, which we'll start with those, but by all means, please continue to enter those in the Q&A. And so one of the first ones was really tied around identifying the niche. And Greg, this is really more pointed towards you. Can you talk a little bit about how some of those digital tools that you mentioned can help contractors identify their niche and track that?
That's great. It comes down to your experience in terms of a company owner. What have you done and been exposed to in the past? Then the kind of staff and crew you've got. You have to have people that are qualified to do a certain work. So let's say that I'm a painter and I've got a crew of 6 guys that do know how to paint, and they understand the painting world and the painting industry. So I can then go in and say, okay, we're going to focus in on anything related to painting, wall covering, whether it's industrial or commercial. And that by itself, 2 different niches. Industrial painting is completely different than in residential, I promise you. But so then you could go into some of the search engines that are out there and say, okay, show me industrial or commercial paint projects, Central Texas, under $1 million, and open wage or union or whatever you would perfect. And then boom, in a blink of an eye, you're looking at a list of 10, 15, or 20 projects. But again, you can filter the search to match your niche. What can your crews do? And that sort of thing. I used to run a big concrete company, and we knocked it out of the park on concrete forming and place and finish. And all of a sudden we started running out of work. And I had a guy walk up to me from Hampton Inn. He said, hey, I need a door and hardware crew. I didn't have a door and hardware crew. That's not my niche. So the risk was either lose all my concrete guys and put them out of work, or I ended up sending them. I sent them to door and hardware school. Now that's a little bit of a rare thing, but I wanted to keep those guys employed. But my real niche was concrete, and I had to remember, don't lose your crew, but stay with what you know.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Let me chime in on that also is, when I was bidding, I kept a record of every project that I bid. And part of that record is how much profit was in the bid of the low bidder based upon my costs. And so as I looked at, I didn't not only look at what was I good at, because I was good at doing government work, but I looked at where's the profit in that government market. What types of jobs are there bigger profit margins? So I was looking for a niche inside of my niche.
Oh, absolutely. Kind of transitioning here to thinking about working capital. And you touched on that working capital ratios are not a one size fits all, but could you talk a little bit more about what's a good starting point? Is it, a historical look at those ratios? And then how do you know if that was enough or if there's something that needs to be improved on?
Yeah, one is it's great to track it historically. There's some ups and downs to that. First off is if the ratio's been bad and it stays bad, that's not necessarily, well, my ratio is the same as was last year, doesn't tell me anything. If it was bad, it's still bad, it's good, still bad. So one is you can track historically, and you want to look at trends. Is it getting better or getting worse? The other thing is there are companies out there that compile data for our industry. This is where it becomes a challenge to just have one size fits all ratio, because in the subcontracting industry, they break that down into several specialties. And you can go in there and you can get data. The one I was looking at the other day broke the specialty industry down into 8 sizes of subcontractors. And then they had ratios going back for the last 10 years. And
Wow.
as we go through different economic cycles and COVID and that, those ratios do change significantly. So it's really hard to come up with those rule of thumbs. This is where you want to get somebody experienced with this involved. You can find those ratios. The best way to find those ratios is go to your local library or your university library and ask them, what data do you have on business ratios? You're more likely to find it at a larger university's library, but there is data that you can easily access from a couple of different sources that will tell you what is the standard for your industry. And then a lot of times they'll have data, but you're going to have to do some number crunching on that data to really be able to get a apples to apples comparison to your company.
Absolutely. This is something that I mentioned. We have the financial consultants here at Build. We're going through every day with our clients and helping them review their historical performance and looking forward. A lot of it has to do with what's their project pipeline look like. And even if the historical ratios were good, if you're growing quickly, sometimes that picture can change pretty quickly as well. Well, I just wanted, we're approaching the top of the hour here. And so I wanted to thank everyone for taking the time out of your day and joining us. Please feel free to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn, and Sebastian will be following up with all of you to provide a copy of this recording as well as the slide deck that we covered today. We're all available for questions. And again, thank you so much to our host and everyone joining.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.